we get into this week's video, as promised, I'm doing my 3,000 subscribers giveaway in this video. I'm giving away products from my very own brand as a small thank you. To enter, all you need to do is like this video, subscribe, and comment. Just comment which of our products are most interesting to you and you would be most excited to try. I will also have all of the rules and instructions listed in the description as well. And this particular giveaway will be open to the US only, so I apologize if you're outside the US, but I promise we'll be doing more of these in the future. We'll also limit it to just one entry per person, so just comment once, and the two winners, their comments will be pinned and highlighted. And the entry period will close on Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Pacific. And you'll also need to be okay with me contacting you via email or Instagram DM to get your shipping information if you win. There's not really a way for us to communicate through YouTube, so you'll just need to be okay with that. And now for the prizes. We're gonna give away two prizes, so it'll basically be winner's choice. You can choose between our Sugar Plum Fairy Gel Polish Collection and Polygel, so pair together. Sugar Plum Fairy Gel Polish Collection plus Polygel bundle, which includes the brush and our 4 polygels, or you can choose our Celestial Love Art Gel Collection plus the Polygel bundle. So I'll also list those in the description so you can see that as well. So basically both prizes will include the full Polygel bundle, but then you'll have your choice between choosing between the full Art Gel Collection along with that or the full Gel Polish Collection. And again, the entries will close on Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Pacific, and the winner will be chosen on Sunday. I have no idea how many people will enter. This is my first time doing this on YouTube, and we're keeping the time frame pretty short, but hopefully a good amount of you will enter, and best of luck to everyone. And thank you so much for supporting and getting me to over now almost 3,500 subscribers, so thank you. Let's get into this week's tutorial. We're going to be doing a spring polygel tutorial for this really stunning green fairy inspired garden set, and we're going to be doing prep, application, shaping, nail art, all of that. If you are a beginner to polygel or struggling or just wanting to watch an in-depth polygel tutorial, this video is definitely for you, so enjoy. And the products we'll be using are from my brand. We're going to be using our Desert Rose Polygel brush and a couple of our gel polishes. This is our website. You can shop at doperthanyournails.com. We have art gels, gel polishes, polygels, brushes, and a lot more new stuff coming soon. And you can always use code YouTube at checkout to save 10%. And this can apply to orders of any size. So let's get into the polygel nail tutorial finally. So we're starting off with prep, so I'm just pushing back the cuticle very gently. My nails were extremely crusty, so I had quite a bit of cleanup to do, so I'm also using my micro taper bit. And then I'm gonna use a fine grit sanding band at a low speed. I use the Melody Susie E file. It goes up to 30 RPMs, but I usually keep it at a speed between 3 and 5. Usually 4 is kind of the sweet spot for at least when I'm using it on the natural nail. And the 240 grit sanding band is a very fine grit sanding band, so I just run that really lightly over the nails. We are going to be doing a square set today, which I'm really excited about. I always love a good square polygel set. So you just want to make sure that you size your tips correctly. If they are too big or they are too small, that could be why your nails are not lasting, or they're popping right off. So these are like too small, for example, so they should fit nicely from sidewall to sidewall without having to apply too much pressure. And I just like to use Young Nail Swipe to dehydrate before I even apply the tips. Some like to use the kind of brush on dehydrator. It's really your own personal preference, but I find Young Nail Swipe works really well. And I also like to use their brush on glue to glue on my nail tips. It's a lot easier to just control the product and make sure that it's kind of staying in the right place. You're not applying too much with the brush. And I just pretty much hold that down for about 10 seconds from different angles, and then just kind of go one by one, gluing each of those nail tips on. I've been using Young Nails brush on glue for a few years now too, and it is by far my favorite. My nails last super long. I have no issues with the tips breaking, so I would recommend trying that out if you haven't already. Now we're gonna use the good old magnet hack with the nail tip cutter to trim down our nails. So this just helps cut down your nails to the same length and makes it super easy. So you just pick out the length you want based on the magnets, or you could use scissors, but This technique works really well in my opinion. Then just using that same fine grit sanding band, I'm just gonna remove the shine from the nail tip, just making sure that we don't overdo it. We don't wanna thin out the nail tip too much. If you do that, that could cause like premature breakage. This is a plastic nail tip, so we just wanna keep a light hand and then also make sure that it's flush with the nail, but also just be careful of not over filing. Then we dust off with alcohol, and now we're gonna use Young Nails Protein Bond, which is a primer, and you'll have to excuse my Protein Bond because as you can see, I'm pretty much running on low. So I had like 2 bottles, I think, so I was like scraping for like whatever was left, but I just apply that to the natural nail and let it air dry. Now we're gonna apply our gel base coat. I like to apply it to the entire nail, but either way, gel base coat is an important step for polygel. Even with our polygels, you definitely wanna make sure you use a gel base coat. It's just gonna help make sure that your polygel actually sticks to your natural nail and that you just have a good foundation and kind of anchor for that product, because polygel is a hybrid gel / gel product. So yeah, like I said, it's basically like your foundation layer, super important, sets you up for a successful polygel nail set. So once you apply that to each nail, you're gonna fully cure in your lamp, and do not wipe off the sticky layer. The sticky layer is actually the most important part, and you'd be surprised how many comments I get saying, are you supposed to wipe the sticky layer or not? So now I always specify, do not wipe off the sticky layer, super important. Now we're gonna take our Gel Polish Frozen Meadows. This is one of our colors available on our site, and we're gonna be doing kind of a ombre-ish chrome look. It's not necessarily like a full-on ombre. It just kind of at least creates like this base color at the free edge, just with the chrome over it. You'll kind of get the full picture once we do it, but it just adds like a nice touch of color to part of the nail. So you just want to apply that on all of the nail tips, and then I'm using our art gel brush to feather that up. And then you just want to fully cure. You can actually do this with any of your gel polishes, with acrylic and polygel, either of those. If you wanted to do like a proper like ombre, or you just wanted to add like a pop of color to your set, you can apply any of your gel polish colors that way. Now we're taking our polygel brush. This is also the brush available on our website. So it's a little bit of a bigger size with a tapered edge, and we're taking 70% isopropyl alcohol, and we're just taking some clear polygel. We've already fully cured the gel polish. We're just gonna encapsulate it with clear just to start building up the structure of the nail. So now I'm just getting my slip solution ready. So when you dip your brush in the 70% isopropyl alcohol, you don't want to just dip it in and go in just like that. You definitely want to wipe off some of the excess on a lint-free wipe or paper towel, but you also don't want to drain out all of the liquid. It's kind of like the same thing with acrylic. Like, you don't want to get rid of like all of your monomer, but you also don't want your brush to be drenched in that. So it's kind of just about finding that in-between spot. So I usually dip my brush in once and dab like 1 to 2 times and end up with something kind of in between like this. This just helps mold your polygel so that your polygel doesn't stick to your brush, and you can actually kind of maneuver it around and place it where you'd like. So with the clear, we're just taking that first bead that I always place basically where the nail tip meets the natural nail, and this first bead's pretty straightforward. You're pretty much just flattening it out and dragging it down to the free edge. We're not really doing anything too fancy here. You don't want to flatten it out completely, but you also want to make sure that you're getting to all the sides, you're not missing any areas, especially in this case because we have gel polish underneath. We don't want to file any of that away. So the clear is going to help kind of protect that, and then it also just helps start building up that structure of the nail. And I do fully cure between each bead as well, a full 60 seconds. So moving on to this finger. So this is kind of what I aim for before I start dragging the product down. I kind of flatten it to what I was just showing in that clip. And then I just start using my brush to pat down, and you can even pat and kind of bring the product up. It doesn't need to be like completely flattened out because this is a longer nail. So you don't want it to be completely flat, but at the same time, you kind of want to just spread out the polygel evenly, making sure that you're covering all edges, but also swiping the sidewalls so that any excess product is getting removed. That's really gonna save you some time when you're shaping, and I think especially with square, I feel like it's even more important because you definitely don't want your nails looking bulky or having excess product. So that's definitely a common thing. Like, you feel like your nails are looking bulky and you're doing square, it's probably just a little bit of cleaning up that needs to happen during your application or shaping. If there's like excess product on the sidewalls, this is usually why. So we're gonna fully cure that, and then we're gonna keep moving on to the rest of the nails and just fully encapsulate that green. We're moving on to this next nail. Let's talk about the polygel brush really quick, because using a quality brush that works for you and not against you is definitely important. So our brush is bigger, but most importantly, I think it kind of has like this tapered design to it, as you can see from that side angle, where it's dense towards the base, but it tapers off at the edge. So at least like kind of like the way that I use it, you know, in my technique, it just makes patting and dragging the product into place like super easy. I always found working with the smaller brush really hard, especially because I like doing longer nails. So this size is really nice. This is our medium brush, so eventually we'll have like even larger brushes, but this is a really nice kind of in-between size that's good for beginners and more advanced artists. And also using a tool to put your polygel onto the nail is also really helpful versus squeezing it onto there. I think it just kind of helps you see visually a lot better like how much product you're actually putting down and make sure you're actually placing the bead where you'd like it. So anyways, I really love this brush. It makes application super easy and it has a really cute design with an acetone resistant handle. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we do more of our polygel application with the actual color that we're going to be using. But for now, you can just see that I'm making sure that the polygel is kind of actually, you know, going to the edge of each nail, but also like that there's no excess product under there. So that's the great thing about polygel. You have unlimited time to work with the product. It's not going to dry until you put it into the lamp. So for the rest of the nail, we're going to be using our Desert Rose Polygel. This is my personal favorite shade. It really is kind of like this dusty rose color. So I'll show you what it looks like. Here's a clip just under like regular like lighting, like my nail lamp, and then with flash and more lighting. And we actually have 4 colors. So Coquette Blush, Wispy Peach, Pink Essence. Wispy Peach is for sure our most popular, followed by Coquette Blush. Pink Essence is also pretty popular, but Desert Rose is my personal favorite. I think it's a really nice color, so if you haven't checked it out, definitely recommend it. We actually sell these bundles at a discounted price, so you can get the polygels for just $33, or if you want the brush included for $44, and you can always use code YouTube to save another 10%. So check this out if you're in the market for some polygel. Okay, so now we're going to be going in with our first bead of Desert Rose on the thumb. We're basically going to be using this to create the apex and build up the rest of the structure of the nail. So for the cuticle area and apex, I like to place it right below and then just kind of start tucking it into that area with the edges of the brush, and then basically kind of smoothing the rest out, but being mindful not to flatten it too much. You don't want to flatten the apex area too much, just because you do need some structure there. You don't need a mountain for an apex, but you also don't want it to be completely flat. And also just making sure that the edges are nice and clean. And in terms of feathering it over the green, honestly, we're gonna be adding chrome over it. So this is why I said it's not really like a perfect ombre design. We're just kind of making sure there's somewhat of a blend of the 2 colors. And it turned out perfectly fine. You can definitely add another layer though if you wanted to. If you feel like you need more product or you just wanna add more of that color over the green, you can definitely add another bead, tuck it into the cuticle area, but make sure you're curing between the beads, and then you can drag down the rest. You can even bring it down over the clear, no problem with that. This is definitely still kind of a, you know, neutral color, so it's not gonna overpower the green. And yeah, like I said, it's gonna get covered up with chrome, but up to you how much you really wanna blend that out. But this is how it's looking just in terms of application. So I really like the combination of the 2 colors with Desert Rose and Frozen Meadows. So moving on to the next nail. So this is kind of where I place the bead for just kind of, you know, second bead placement, apex / cuticle area. So you want to start flattening it out a little bit and then tucking it up. You don't want to flatten it out completely. And then even in terms of tucking it into that area, if you feel like some of it's getting a little bit messy, just use the edges of your brush to clean it up. And kind of just make sure that you're tilting from angle to angle, side to side. So you're kind of checking it from all areas. And then this area is where I start to pat more versus dragging. I just try to make sure that that area looks kind of, you know, nice and even the way I want it, you know, there's enough structure, and then I'll start dragging the rest down. But as you can see, it's like a minimal amount compared to the rest. So basically all of that to say, you don't want to drag down all of the product and remove all of the structure that you've built. So showing again here on the ring finger, this is kind of what we flatten it out to. And then we just kind of keep going with that and slowly start tucking it into the cuticle area. And that kind of pretty much builds up your apex. I definitely used to go for the mountain of an apex, but kind of over the years you learn, and at least for me, like, I kind of find that I don't need a huge apex anymore, like even, you know, kind of more on the flat side, but definitely not completely flat is totally fine. And I think the 2-bead method definitely helps with that. So yeah, that's how the ring finger turned out. And then I went ahead and cured everything once it was nice and even. And then there is a stickler when you cure the polygel, so you just want to make sure you wipe that off with some alcohol before we go in for our shaping. We're going to be using the Young Nails dust collector. Very important, make sure you use a dust collector so you can make sure that dust is going just into the collector and not everywhere. And we're also going to be using some safety glasses and then a mask. I normally use an N95 mask, and that's what I would recommend. I was just out, so I'm just using a regular mask, but normally I would use an N95 mask, so definitely use some sort of mask as well. And then we're going to be using our Melody Susie e-file, and we're going to be starting off with the 5-in-1 Pana bit. This is the fine grit one. And if you've been watching my videos, you know this is what I always start out with, and I always use it at a speed about 4 RPMs. I know it's going to seem like I'm showing a ton of steps for the shaping, but this step actually helps me have to shape less, even though I use quite a few tools. So I basically just use this to clean up the cuticle area first and kind of refine the apex as needed. It's a fine grit one, so it's not gonna, you know, file away all of your polygel, but you definitely want to let the drill bit do the work for you. And there I was just showing you want to use it as parallel as possible. Don't tilt it up too much, just because you'll start digging into your nail, which is no good. You can also use it to clean up underneath. I didn't have anything to clean up, so I didn't want to file under there, but definitely good to clean up excess product as well, just because it has that kind of cone shape. So I basically just used it as a low speed, at a low speed, and run it around the cuticle area just to make sure everything is nice and flush and sealed. This just helps prevent lifting in that area. And again, definitely let the drill bit do the work for you, because it's really easy to file away too much. And yeah, I just go ahead and do that for all 5 nails. And I feel like for me, this is just really helps me visually see where I actually need to shape more or less. And then I just dust off with some alcohol. And then the next thing I do is I go in with a round Pana bit. I could probably skip this step, but I just can't. I just really love using this bit to go over the entire nail. You just want to make sure that, I think especially in this case, because we applied a gel polish color, that you're keeping your drill bit moving, just so you don't file through all of that clear and accidentally drill away the green gel polish. But this is a really great bit, which is why I think I will always use it to some degree, just because it's really great for debulking, but it also just kind of starts help building up the shape of like that perfect square nail. Or not explain it, but something just about the round barrel bit is super helpful for just getting in both the cuticle and apex area, and also like the free edge. So I feel like even if your application's like pretty good, like just running this over the surface definitely helps. And I do think it's kind of a combination of the e-file and the drill, at least for me with longer nails, that really helps me get that kind of crispy square shape that we all like. So then I go ahead and dust away, and we're going to be using a hand file to finish. And so I'm just showing here that I always start off by filing under the nail, but I try to keep my file as straight as possible because it's really easy to over file and create kind of a notch on the side. So if you try to keep your file kind of straight, I know it's hard, especially when you're filming. I try to show it as best as I can, but you just don't want to tilt your file too much upwards or any other way besides flat and parallel, because you will create a notch in your nail, and that definitely ruins the square shape. So that just helps remove product under the nail. But then for filing against the sidewall, we just want to keep it straight as well. If you start filing kind of the angled way that I was showing, you're going to end up with a coffin shape. So again, if you want that kind of like perfect square, try to keep it as straight as possible. This is for just filing against the sidewall. And I also try to stay away from the corners and try not to overdo it there, because it's really easy to overfile into them. And again, you end up with that coffin shape, and it's not easy to fix once you've done that. Then I file over the surface of the nail, and once you see that cloudy area over the entire surface, you'll know that you've hit every angle. If you feel like your cuticle area and your apex area is already like super perfect, you don't want to remove any other product, I would skip running it over that area just so you don't thin it out more, but I just run it over the entire area and try to do at least one swipe over the entire nail. Then I use a sanding band underneath, which we'll talk more about if you want to do more of kind of the C-curve moon shape. But then I just buff with cuticle oil to get rid of any scratches. I'm literally doing this voiceover at like 1 a.m. So I'm using the cuticle oil to buff away any scratches and just kind of get that really, really smooth finish. You could also use a fine grit sanding band, but I've just been using like buffers lately. And that's it. So we're gonna go ahead and do that for all the rest of the nail. So we're starting off again with filing under the nail on both sides. If you don't have a ton of product underneath, you probably don't even need to do this, but I try to do at least a little bit of each step because I feel like hand filing is what really ties the whole look together. Especially for me when I was like really struggling to get kind of like that very square shape, I found that hand filing actually tied the look more together versus the E-file. But again, I do think you need a combination of both, which is super helpful. So for the sanding band, if you wanted to do more of like a C-curve and kind of like the moon shape versus just like the flat edge, you can use kind of the edge of your sanding band and tilt it up to create that. So I'll show that in a little bit more depth in a bit, but you just don't want to angle it too much or overdo it, because then you'll end up with a really deep C-curve / moon shape, unless that's what you want, but I just wanted to do a little bit. So also I am using 80/80 grit hand files. You can use a less coarse file if you wanted to. This is a pretty sharp / coarse file, and polygel is softer than acrylic, but not like super soft to the point that, you know, it's gonna break or it has no strength, but it is softer to file than acrylic. So if you feel like this is too coarse, you can definitely use like 100/180 grit. But I've just been using these for so long now that like they are coarse, but like if you season the edges and once you get used to it, it's not that bad, and I feel like it actually helps me file faster than if I were to use a less coarse file. So I think the only thing is if you wanted something less coarse on the surface of the nail, you could definitely do that. But again, I feel like this alone works really great as well, and it's really great for the free edge. So here's what I mean about the moon shape. You just kind of want to tilt your sanding band / E-file, you know, a little bit upwards, and then it'll slowly start carving out that moon shape. I would just do a little bit at a time. So you can see I'm like really like kind of going in a little bit at a time to carve it out. And then you just want to keep going back in bit by bit to make sure it's even. But this adds a really nice finish to your nails. I don't do it all the time, but every now and then it's really fun to do, and it does help thin out the free edge if you have a lot of product there, but it just looks really clean with some designs, so I thought it would be fun to do that for today so you can kind of see the difference. So I love both looks, but for this one I wanted to add a little bit of that. I'm just gonna let the rest of the clips play in terms of shaping while you watch, and then we will come back for nail art. So once everything is dusted, all 5 nails are shaped, this is where we're pretty much at in the process. So now we're gonna be doing chrome. So I went ahead and did it on the pinky as a test, and now I'm gonna show you how I did that on each of the nails. So you just wanna cleanse with alcohol just to make sure we don't have any dust. And we're also gonna be applying a top coat because you do need a non-wipe top coat for the Aurora Chrome. That's gonna work best. So for this look that we're going for here. And this is why I said you didn't need a perfect blend of the colors, because the chrome kind of creates the blend as well. We're going to be using the Pretty Diva Mermaid Chrome Powder from Amazon. And then we're applying a non-wipe top coat over the entire nail. We're going to fully cure that, and then we will apply our chrome powder. So again, definitely use a non-wipe top coat, and I would actually recommend using a top coat that you have set aside just for chrome, just because, I don't know, you never know like what particles can like cross-contaminate, and you don't want chrome in your top coat. So I have a designated one. But anyways, once that's fully cured, you're just gonna take your chrome powder and use like an eyeshadow applicator or whatever you want and just start rubbing that in. And I love using Aurora chrome powder. I've been using this particular one from Amazon for like years now, and it looks so stunning on like different colors. This is the first time I did it on green, and once I applied it, I was like, okay, the vision is coming to life, because it just looked like the perfect blend of the two colors with like the metallic finish. So the makeup sponge helps remove any excess, and then you can go ahead and cure again for a safe measure, and then top coat it, just because we are going to be doing nail art over everything. So I went ahead and top coated that just to seal it in, and then we're going to go ahead and repeat that on all 5 nails. So top coat, cure, chrome powder, dust off, cure again, and top coat, and then cure again. I've also seen some people use like just the makeup sponges to apply the chrome, but I don't know, like I haven't tried that yet. And I've seen some people use like the silicone tools. If you're gonna use your hands, I wouldn't recommend it, but you should just be wearing gloves in general, just in case. And chrome powder is messy, so I would wear a mask too as well, and kind of put a paper towel underneath. So this is how everything is looking before the nail art. I actually really loved how these looked on their own. I just went ahead and top coated everything again just so it's sealed in, because now it's finally time for nail art. So we're taking Winter's Veil from our Sugar Plum Fairy Gel Polish collection. I use this in like every nail set. I always find a use for it. It's just super versatile. And then I'm mixing up a couple of different green colors, like different shades, because I wasn't sure exactly what I was gonna do yet. But just to start, we're drawing a very large circle with the Winter's Veil, and then I'm taking kind of a lighter green, and I'm just gonna start drawing leaves. So we're just gonna do a really large flower. So I'm using the kind of mixture I had of the darker green and lighter green to start shading a little bit on top of that. And then to add another layer of shading, we're actually gonna go in with the Winter's Veil. I think shading with the pearlescent white is actually like, I don't feel like I've really seen anyone use it for that, but I feel like I've been doing that a lot lately, and I really love how it turns out, because it does have that pearly kind of dimensional effect. So especially for this kind of fairy garden inspired set, it worked really well. So if you have our Winter's Veil gel polish, I would definitely even recommend trying some of the shading and detail work with that, because it does add a really nice pop of color. So we're gonna go ahead and draw all the rest of the leaves. So just using a longer liner brush to draw out each leaf. Using a longer liner brush definitely helps with that, just because it's easier to kind of get the curve of a line. You just want to start at a point and then kind of curve the line out and then connect them all. So, and then you can actually blend the colors. I blended the lighter green on top of the base, but then I fully cured that before I added the Winter's Veil. But I've also blended colors like right on top of each other before curing, and that can work too. It just kind of depends on how much you kind of want them to literally blend together, because some of them will kind of, you know, kind of all mix together, and then you kind of can't really tell what's what. But for some colors, I do feel like it's better to cure in between. So I was getting a little bit of excess polish there, so I had to clean it up. So anyways, last leaf, we're gonna go ahead and fill that in. Our palette for this nail set is really simple. Just like a few different shades of green, Frozen Meadows, and then Winter's Veil, and then some 3D details. I went ahead and added some rhinestone glue / builder gel. This gel has that type of consistency on top, just to add a little bit of a 3D element. And then I created some 3D lines with that as well, just using a liner brush to add a few lines at the top and the bottom. So here's how everything looked after top coat. This was definitely in line with the fairy garden vision that I had. So we're gonna go ahead and continue. The next nail is gonna be pretty simple. We're gonna draw kind of like these just longer lines that are kind of reminiscent of like vines almost, but keeping it pretty simple. This is how I loaded up my brush. I am using a longer liner brush and just kind of working the product in there, and then kind of just making sure I have a little bit more at the bottom because I'm kind of creating this little blob at the end, and then kind of curving the line to be thinner from there. So if you need to do like 2 layers of that, definitely, you know, do it kind of in bits and pieces as needed, but definitely kind of creating this little blob at the end just for some, you know, a little bit of kind of like a vine effect, and then just basically kind of curving the lines. So I just drew 1 more at the top. And just so it didn't blend in with the background too much, and we're kind of using these different colors again like we did for the thumb, I added more of that green mixture. And then I also added more of the Winter's Veil on top as well. For this, I'm using a shorter liner brush just because these were pretty small, so it just made it easier to make sure that I was staying within the lines. Now using Winter's Veil again just to draw 2 large circles. Guys, I just really love this color. And you know what's funny? It wasn't like my favorite from the collection, but as time goes on, I'm like, this is just like a really great versatile color. So anyways, went ahead and cured that and then added some 3D gel on top of that just for some dimension, and then top coated. Now for the next finger, we're gonna be doing a butterfly kind of silhouette, just like half of it. So I'm taking that green and we're drawing the top of the butterfly's wing. So you basically start at a point and start drawing these really curved lines. It's almost like a larger leaf if you think about it. But the key is just basically to start at a point and have like really long flowy lines. And then you're gonna be drawing these other lines within them. So you wanna start by drawing the outline of the line, and then once those are kind of placed, that's when you wanna go in and start adding more of the curves at the edges, because that's going to really create the butterfly wing effect. Maybe there's an easier way to do it, but this is the way that I do it. It's just kind of draw the actual outlines of the wings and then go back in with some more gel polish and start creating more curved lines. I added way too much there, so I had to go back and redo it, but this starts to come to life very quickly. So super easy. You pretty much just go in from top to bottom, make sure everything is nice and curved. Now adding in the outline for the bottom wing, which is a little bit more, not so much as structured as the top, but I just drew 1 line at the bottom first and added the curves for that, and then I went ahead and cured that before I drew the second line. See, I'm kind of taking my time just to make sure it's nice and curved. Then I drew the second line here, and then again, just adding in those curves just to create that butterfly wing. So it's pretty simple once you break it down step by step. Next, we're gonna take those same lighter green mixtures and Winter's Veil and just add a little bit of dimension on top of the wing. So I just went in with that lighter green mixture first, fully cured that, and then I'm gonna go in with Winter's Veil as well, just to add a little bit more pop of color. This is the first time that I've stuck to like a really simple palette, you know, in a while, and it was kind of nice. You can really do a lot with just a couple of colors, you know? So once that's fully cured, we are going to be adding in some 3D elements. Nothing too crazy, just taking that 3D gel and basically filling in the gaps of the wings. I went in with 1 layer, and then once I fully cured, I went in with the second one just to make sure that they were a little bit more raised and, you know, there was some dimension there. And I really love how this turned out. It was like reflecting with the chrome underneath, and it really created a really nice effect even with just a clear gel. Here's the final result for that nail after top coating. And then for the final 2 nails, we're keeping it pretty simple. I went ahead and mixed Winter's Veil with a small amount of the green mixture up here. And we are going to use this on the ring finger to create kind of like 3D blobs. So I went ahead and took a generous amount and went ahead and drew like 3 diagonal lines and did 2 layers and fully cured that. And then to make it even more of a blob / 3D effect, I went ahead and took that same 3D gel and added that on top. So yeah, just very simple, Wanted to just kind of do a different shade of green, and then I went ahead and cured that and top coated on top and around that. And for the pinky, also very simple, just gonna do like 2 stars. So I always start with a dot at the center and then use a longer liner brush just to drag out all 4 corners. The key is just to make sure that the center dot is not cured because it just makes it easier to drag out the polish. Then I added a few more clear dots with that 3D gel and went ahead and top coated, and this is the final result. I really love how this turned out. It is the perfect green spring polygel set. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to enter our giveaway as well. All of the entry requirements will be in the description.